And he also was involved in some of the analysis of materials from excavations on the first terrace of Monk's Mound, the historic period occupation of that particular area. But today he's going to be talking about what he found over in St. Louis. So I'll get this fired up here.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Okay.
It's trying to work. There you
go. Okay. So wait to make sure we get the microphones registering.
I have a problem with the camera being turned in the wrong direction. Sounds good. It's broadcasting in portrait mode while we're filming it in landscape mode. I can't fix that though. I don't know what to do. It'll be fine. We're good. We got it.
Okay. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about, we're going to focus on the early historical period in St. Louis and the initial settlement by the French and French-Canadian families who settled there early on. And with all the talk about the 250th anniversary of the United States and everything, as many of people know in this area, well, St. Louis was platted in 1764, and 2014 was St. Louis's 250th anniversary. So, I mean, this is going on with St. Louis. So, quite a bit of historic period notoriety there. Okay.
should be that right there. Should work. Worked earlier. Oh, perhaps if I turned it on, it would help.
Ah, okay. There. Now we're on. Okay. Okay, so the French occupation of the Illinois country on the east side of the Mississippi River is well known from previous excavations and research, historical and archaeological investigations, St. Clair County, Monroe County, and we talk about Randolph County, especially Randolph County. And these settlements had lucrative economies centered on agriculture as well as the fur trade. And St. Louis, or St. Genevieve, Missouri, also on the west side of the Mississippi. So when the east side of the river was surrendered by treaty to Great Britain in 1763, some of the French residents relocated to what was Spanish territory on the west side of the river in what was to become St. Louis. Of course, we also know Cahokia was founded on the east side of the river. The village is St. Cahokia, 1699, and the village of Kaskaskia, the French village, 1703. So early maps show that the original properties and also the village plat, as you can see here, and a new perspectives on the founding and development of St. Louis was offered by Carl Eckbert and Sharon Pearson back in 2015 when they published their book St. Louis Rising, University of Illinois Press. And they were downplaying the Laclede and Chateau in the founding, and instead pointing out the commandant at Fort Deschartres when he moved the French troops to St. Louis when the English came in. And a lot of the research that they found is that the commandant actually was more responsible for establishing St. Louis than a lot of the stories and everything that went on with Chateau and Laclede. So this is the Poplar Street Bridge Project. I'm going to be talking tonight, and here's the outlay of the area on the original plat there, and this is a 1780 map, but the original plat of St. Louis, and this is the area that was impacted by the Poplar Street Bridge Project. Like it's a 1780 map, but this gives them some idea where we're talking about here. So the Missouri Department of Transportation, the Poplar Street Bridge Project here, necessitated cultural resource management studies and mitigation of archaeological resources in the project area, and this took place between 2013 and 2017. This area encompassed 4 city blocks near the Mississippi River and south of the Jefferson National Expansion Memorial, which is here. So again, and the ballpark, the best landmark, I think, to point out there. Okay, so several of the sites related to the early French colonial settlement in St. Louis were identified and investigated. And today I'm going to concentrate on the Berger site down here. And this was the last of the French heritage sites to be investigated as the Poplar Street Bridge Project. And it also has the largest collections of artifacts and animal remains of any of the projects, any of the other sites in the area that were investigated. Again, overlay, and here's the Berger site here with the showing the detail of that. So the mitigation of the Poplar Street Bridge Project, archaeological resources resulted in the discovery of French colonial period house foundations and artifact assemblages that were located in 4 city blocks. The Berger site, in terms of the animal remains, Berger site had over 7,400 specimens of animal remains, and all the other sites there, a grand total of 600 animal remains. So that's the Berger site by far is the most significant. Now, if you look at some of the historic documents to go on what we were expecting to find and everything based on historical documents, and look at Sharon Pearson and Carl Eckbert's notes that said that typical diets for early residents, early French residents, consisted of eggs, milk, chicken, pork, fresh venison, and fish. So very basic. And the configuration of the village there was a classic Illinois country agricultural village when the original village was platted. And there, the records talking about large livestock, which would be oxen and cattle, and small livestock, which would be pigs. So, details on these various investigations were described by project archaeologist Michael Mayer in the Missouri Archaeologist, and also Le Journal, a couple of articles there, and technical reports prepared for MoDOT. Le Journal is the newsletter quarterly newsletter of the Center for French Colonial Studies, and that's most of the members are right in the St. Louis area for that. So if we look at the occupational history, and this was outlined by Meyer in this 2018 Missouri Archaeologist article. And if we go through and look at some of the highlights of this, Pierre Berger lived at the site from 1766 through 1778, and he was involved with the fur trade as a traveling merchant during part of that time. Hubert Thibault acquired the property in 1780, and he constructed a new post and ground house, and Spanish records describe Thibault's occupation as being a rower. Jean-Baptiste Marly was a blacksmith, and he lived on the property with his family from 1786 through the 1820s. Marly himself died in 1805, but his family continued to occupy the property until the 1820s. Then a row of brick houses stood on the property from about 1825 until 1850. So that's a basic thumbnail sketch of the occupational history of this area. The large excavation block was placed in the center of City Block 41 in the construction easement to identify features that were associated with early colonial and 19th century privies and cisterns. 4 features were related to 18th century occupations, including 2 wall trenches up here and over here, and remnants of a shallow basin over here, and additional hand excavations revealed 12 additional 18th century features, including a cellar under the original Berger house, and this contained fill from the Thibault occupation and his removal of the old house. Most significant of all of this in terms of the artifacts and what we're talking about tonight is this trash pit of 41-4, this right here. Now, if we look at the stratigraphy of feature 41-4, you can see that's a 90 centimeter deep trash pit that intrudes into the cellar, and it contains a mixture of pre-1820 domestic and industrial refuse. Michael Meyer described this as its primary function was as a dump for ash and waste products from the blacksmith shop. The lowest layer was from the original use and abandonment of the feature associated with Berger and Thibault occupations, and the stratified ashy soil, which is zone 2, are from the Marley household and smithy. And these zones contain most of the artifacts. And these assemblages are unique for the Poplar Street Bridge Project area. In addition to more than 6,000 animal remains, there are, lists off some of the highlight of the artifacts here, brass or copper scraps and lead bale seals, a utilized chert flake, dozens of French, British, and locally made gun flints along with manufacturing debris, several stone pipe bowls or micmacs, Native American ceramic sherds from at least 2 different vessels, several coarse, red-slipped, shell-tempered earthenware sherds, possibly from colonial ware or trade vessels from the lower Mississippi Valley, and plus sherds of refined tin enameled earthenware, creamware, and pearlware, some of the basic historic materials. This suggests that Jean-Baptiste Marly was more than a blacksmith and possibly was also bartering goods and services to St. Louis inhabitants as well as Native American groups in the area and outside of the area. So to look at some of the faunal assemblage here, by component, most of the animal remains are associated with the Marly component. The colonial French listing here is 18th century contacts that cannot clearly be specified as either Berger or Thibault occupation or Marly occupation. But you can see the vast majority of this is coming from the Marly occupation. Looking at graphs of the animal classes for the 18th century, French occupation shows that this is percentages based on number of identified specimens, and this is including 19th century over here, just as a way of comparing and contrasting some of the patterns that we're seeing here. The basic thing what we're seeing here with the animal classes is that mammals are predominant in each one of these components. Here. And then this next in abundance would be remains of birds. So if we're looking at mammals, and this again is showing percentage by number of identified specimens. And, cattle, deer, and pigs are most abundant, but there's several other wild animal taxa, including black bear. And see that here. And the other mammals, well, we'll go into that in more detail, but despite disparities in sample sizes from the various components here, the cattle remains tend to become more plentiful than deer over time. So you can see that trend going in here. So other mammals include little bit smattering of sheep, goat, and horse. Okay, so now if we're looking at this in terms of dietary contributions, we look at number of specimens. That doesn't take into account, okay, you get a squirrel bone versus a deer bone, but this, you convert the weight of these animal remains into biomass using formulas that archaeologists down at the Museum of Natural History in Florida developed. This is another way of looking at dietary contributions. So if we look at it that way, we're going to see that the importance values of cattle is predominant, and then deer is next, and then we'll see bear and other mammals. So this is by biomass. Okay, and this is in looking at some of the other French sites that we looked at previously. These are much smaller sample sizes, but this shows that these sites adjacent to the Berger site, some of the trends we see here. Now, one thing that's pointing out here, the Fifi site, is this particular feature here. When that was excavated, Michael Meyer thinks that's predominantly a Native American feature that predates the French occupation. So that it's got historic domestic animals in it, but that's just before the French get into this. So that's a possible Indian refuse pit from the early to mid 18th century. Okay, now if we look at more details for the number of identified specimens and the minimum number of individuals that's represented here. This points out that the perpetual difficulty in distinguishing at the site and many other historic sites of this time period cattle from bison. We have one bone here that's possibly bison, one that's definitely bison. We've got the bones from cattle that are definitely cattle, and then we've got some that are probably cattle, and then we've got others that we can't really distinguish. So among those that we do have that's definitely bison, there's a bison horn core. And we have a number of, it's kind of interesting in this, in the site, we've got a number of cattle horn core. They're definitely cattle, and they're sawed, and we have one that's definitely bison that's sawed. So now where they brought that in from is an interesting question. But it's from colonial French component. Now, we're looking at deer by component. Somewhat surprising was the recovery of 277 bones and teeth from deer from all of the 18th century components, making up 38% of all identified specimens that were associated with the French occupation. And this is the largest number for any other species, including cattle. So despite this being an agricultural village, and with the French being there, we're still seeing a lot of wild animal resources being brought in, especially deer. So some of the other cut antlers that we're seeing from deer, a lot of antler waste, and a lot of these are sawed. We're seeing that. So a number of different uses of deer antlers for maybe awl handles, tool handles of various kind, maybe buttons, various things. But they're out making a lot of use of deer antlers, and we're finding a lot of that with this blacksmith component here. So other modified mammal remains from the French occupation include lice cone and button blanks here, made up from bone. And black bear remains. This is kind of surprising, again, given the setting of the site here, but we're getting black bear remains, and with a couple of different components here. Most of the black bear remains are from the crania and from the feet, but we're also getting some bones from the front and forelimbs as well, or the legs. But it's mostly feet, cranial, and teeth from the bear. And there's a number of things that might represent in terms of fur trade. That a lot of the foot bones and everything just are kind of riders that come in with the hides that hadn't been removed or too much trouble to take out. That's some of the basic traditional interpretation of the abundance of bare feet at bare foot bones at the site and in other sites. So otherwise, we look at miscellaneous mammals here. By component, pig remains are present, but they're less numerous than deer and cattle. Other small and medium-sized mammals include cottontail, possum, squirrels, fur trade species. We've got beaver, muskrat, and bobcat. We've got house cat and canid, either dog or coyote, and those probably are dog. And these are probably reflecting, or may reflect pets at the site. Okay, and this graph is a summary of mammals, the MNI and the biomass for all 18th century occupations, and shows some diversity among mammals despite the old village setting, again, with the swine, the cattle, and then we've got all the deer, we've got bear, and then these others, which are mostly wild animals. So a lot of interesting patterns there, not just your traditional barnyard animals that we might expect from an early historic setting. Okay, then turning our attention to birds. So most of the birds in the 18th century components are waterfowl. And 3 of the miscellaneous species from the Marley occupation also occur in wetlands. And these would include pied-billed grebes, American coot, sandhill crane, that would be these here. Also present amongst the miscellaneous are prairie chicken and red-tailed hawk. So most of the identified fish bones are from catfish. And 28 are blue catfish, and 22 of the catfish bones are from individuals over 80 centimeters or 32 inches in length. Some as large as 136 centimeters or 4.5 feet in length, and these would weigh anywhere between 60 and 80 pounds. So this is similar to the American Bottom French sites on the east side of the river. Sites around Fort Deschartres, Cahokia, these are the same kind of things we're finding there. So the same pattern of going after big catfish is something that we see. We also see, we did see on the Illinois side some buffalo fish that were included there, but here on this side it's mostly the big catfish, big blue catfish, and something that's really unusual that we don't see very often, and Cricket can testify to this when we're looking at fish bones, can actually see where these were chopped. These are skull bones from blue catfish that were chopped, the pectoral spine and everything. So this is basically like butchering a hog, taking these big blue catfish and the way these things were butchered. So very unusual. And these are examples from Fort Deschartres number 3, the Lauren site on the Illinois side here. Reptile remains, mostly from eastern box turtle. It's kind of interesting given the situation. We've also got some snapping turtle, painted turtle from the Marley component. Small pieces from pond turtles that we couldn't distinguish as either map turtle, slider, or painted turtles. Most of the freshwater mussel shells that we got are from the Marley component, and then there's eastern oyster shells in the 19th century component. So freshwater mussel shells are appearing there as well, and they might be remnants of, maybe collecting them for buttons or whatever. But so anyway, these are represented as well. So present in the Marley occupation is this tooth, which has a small perforation in it down here. And this took some extensive comparisons in the Illinois State Museum osteology collections before we could make a final determination on that. And this is what it is. It's from the upper dentition of American alligator. And although occasional alligators may have occurred in the middle Mississippi River, I think there's been a report or two from Cape Girardeau that there might have been a stray alligator up in that area. But the tooth is most likely a pendant that was obtained from the lower valley in Louisiana or southeastern Arkansas. And remember that we have North American or Native American ceramics and trade vessels from the lower Mississippi Valley. So this kind of fits in with that trade and interaction that may be going on. So the diversity of wild animal species illustrates what Shannon Doughty talked about, a taste for the wild, and with the French. And then she described this from New Orleans, studying the French situation down in New Orleans, and we're seeing the same kind of thing here in the Illinois country. With in addition to domestic animals, there's still a lot of choice of taste for the wild, and including passenger pigeons and other things that we see. Even when I was looking at Fort Deschartres, some of the first times I was looking at Fort Deschartres number 3, some of those collections, I was coming up with large bird bones that took me a while to figure out what they were. They were very fragmentary, but turned out to be pieces from sandhill cranes. Now, sandhill cranes are large birds, but there's not a whole lot of meat on them, and so it's kind of a situation where the French were really eager to experiment with birds, and I can see sandhill cranes. I wonder what that tastes like, and that's what I've got in the refuse from these French sites in Illinois. So in conclusion, the zooarchaeological studies for these 18th century sites as part of the Poplar Street Bridge Project are significant for illustrating important aspects of the local economy, social context, and the environment during the 18th century. And there are similarities to patterns of livestock management and hunting that occurred at earlier and contemporaneous French colonial agricultural sites in the American Bottom, here on the east side of the Mississippi River, and the presence of wild animals such as white-tailed deer, black bear, and bison, among other mammals, beaver, muskrat, raccoon, bobcat. These are consistent with impressions gained from some of the recovered artifacts and showing the importance of trade, commerce, and interaction with local and perhaps more distant Native American groups. The abundance of waterfowl among the bird remains and identification of very large blue catfish also indicates the importance of the Mississippi River and the local environments with the floodplain wetlands for continuation of local foodways and cuisines among the French and the French-Canadian habitants of early St. Louis. So all this, I think the importance of looking at the St. Louis Poplar Street Bridge Project with these French is seeing this as a continuation of what's going on the east side of the Mississippi River with the earlier French occupations there. And that it's a continuation that goes on in St. Louis. So thank you for your attention. I'll happy any questions.
I've got one.
Yeah.
You showed the eastern oyster shell. What's your explanation for how that got here?
Well, working on historic sites in the Lincoln Home site and other sites in Illinois, see a lot of the commercial trade in oysters and marine fish that comes in there. And I think if I was looking at some of the other components, I was looking just at the French components here in St. Louis, and I would bet you would find more, oyster shells in a lot of those components. And not only that, but in the Illinois sites, we would find oyster shells and quahog clams as well. So they're brought in by the rail lines later in time, and brought in barrels, salted. And we also would get on some of the Illinois sites, we would get Atlantic cod, we'd get mackerel. And then was kind of surprising also looking at the fish remains in some of the Lincoln Home sites context, finding lake whitefish, lake trout, and some of the things from the Great Lakes area that were shipped in. So when you're looking at these things, to be aware of what's going on in terms of commercial, networks and everything. And one of the things that's kind of became working with Floyd Mansberger on some of these sites, the Lincoln Home site, newspaper accounts, looking at newspaper advertising to see advertising for seasonal abundances when oysters are shipped in and when different fish are coming in. And you'll see newspaper advertisements that local markets are having, saying the fish are in, for the cod are in, fresh cod is in and everything.
They're mostly salted.
But they're mostly salted in barrels or dried. Yeah.
Was the remains from the Lawrence site, was that from Bob Mazur and Margaret Brown's excavations?
Well, there was two series of excavations. The initial excavations was Ed Jelks, Illinois State University, and that was the earlier part, and that was on the what would that be? The levee side of the road. And then when Mazur and Margaret Brown continued the work, they got permission to work on the other side of the property, but it's the same site.
But was there a lot of that? I mean, where the bones found? I was on both of those on the other side. So was there a lot? I don't remember a lot of bones being found there.
Yeah, it's quite a few.
Was it?
Yeah. That's a real pattern with the French, the way the refuse disposal with the French versus British and a lot of the American sites. Seems like the French discarded things right out the back door, whereas
a
lot of trash and everything. And then when it was time the post and ground structures were decayed, it was time to move. Well, and it was time to move, it's time to sweep all the debris from previous dumping that went on. So you get a lot of mixture and everything. But those two sides of the road, looking at the animal remains from those components are virtually identical in terms of percentages of what species and everything. Yeah.
I'm wondering about the deer. From what you know from the archaeological record and from the historic documents, were the French hunting the deer, or was that mostly trade with the native people?
It's hard to know because there again, some of the other sites, earlier sites, it was probably mostly Indians that were doing the hunting and bringing those in for, and there again, it wasn't just the venison, it's the deer hides were really important in the fur trade. A lot of people talk about the beaver and everything, but that's farther north. And then in the Midwest area here from Fort Weatnan on the Wabash, Fort St. Joseph in Michigan, and these Illinois sites, if you're trapping beaver or any of the mustelas for the fur trade and concentrating on them, you'll pretty much wipe out the population. Whereas deer, that's you can't hardly wipe them out. They're
so you don't think they were overhunted?
No, I think they may have been going out, but again, any of our experiences, if you have a garden and everything, you're going to have deer there. And that's another thing that talk about denning trees for raccoons. I don't think you need to look for denning trees to get raccoons because they'll come around if there's any trash around at all.
Is that recorded? Are there accounts of the townspeople seeing deer? Or
No, I've not seen that. There's no detail on that. So there again, it's kind of speculation who was actually hunting that. But I would bet in the case of St. Louis that these are the French themselves going out and hunting those. and getting the birds and everything. Yeah.
You briefly mentioned passenger pigeons.
Mhm.
When do you think it was they were completely wiped out, and why?
Well, that's an interesting debate. One of the more recent books on passenger pigeons, one of the authors who's in Chicago came through the State Museum, and we discussed that and everything. And one of the things that he thinks that with passenger pigeons that there may have been a population explosion that was just kind of coincidental with Europeans coming into North America. Because if you look at Native American sites, you don't see that much in the way of passenger pigeon. Cricket, yeah, you don't get many. And I've not seen many, but when you get these French colonial sites, no matter which sites they are, now the Poplar Street Bridge site, I don't remember getting passenger pigeon there, but the Illinois sites and Fort St. Joseph, Fort Weatnan, lots of passenger pigeons. And in fact, Weatnan even has Carolina parakeet, and they're extinct.
Why were all the passenger pigeons? There were so many of them.
Well, I think they were, then there was a lot of commercial hunting went on for that. And a lot of people talk about refrigerated train cars going to New York, to the Midwest. They were shipping a lot of the passenger pigeons that were hunted, and they were being sold for dinners in New York City. So they were luxury dessert or luxury food items, you know, in the East Coast, and they were hunted big time commercially, and then put in refrigerated cars and shipped to the East Coast. So there was a concerted effort at hunting them at that time. Yeah.
Was this project the same time as that project for the arch with Joe Harrell and Robin? Because we worked on that.
Okay, 2013 to 2017 was a time period for the Poplar Street Bridge excavations.
We were in the same area, right?
Yeah, right.
Same area, yeah,
Hillary.
yeah, yeah.
You went to the privy. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Did you get stuff from the privy?
No, never.
That was the big of a lifetime.
The romance of archaeology, huh?
Oh, yes. 4 degrees, too.
Yeah.
I was wondering, with the excavation being in the cellar of Blacksmith's house, besides button blanks and beads and that drills alligator, was there any indication of people being incorporated into blacksmith goods, like remote handles or otherwise?
Unfortunately, final report has never been written on the artifacts from this, and that's something that hopefully we can push to get that done. So I've just seen the animal remains, and then what other information I have is from the report from the Missouri archaeologist Michael Meyer did.
Like the bones were like saws and like started and
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. Other French sites have seen a lot of this same kind of thing with sawed antlers, using them for different things on these French sites. In fact, a couple of weekends ago, Fort St. Joseph had their big public open house, and in one of the trenches there was a big piece of deer antler. Each one of the tines had been sawed off, and the antler itself had been sawed off, so it wasn't a shed antler. And so you could see that here was a blank. There was still a lot left on that antler, but all the points had been sawed off and taken away and used for something. Yeah.
What was happening that caused the Poplar Street Bridge Project to come into play? What were they doing?
Well, it was they were doing stabilization of superstructure for the bridge. I guess they had determined that it needed repairs, and so that was the opportunity to go in and really do searches for the original French area there. And there was a lot of later material, but Meyer was really concerned and really looked hard to find the French, and a lot of that was deeply buried, and a lot of disturbance and everything, and apparently quite a bit of looting had taken place in a lot of these deposits too. So, yeah.
So is this when they were making that earthquake, they were adding those things to the columns for earthquake protection? That bridge, I think.
Possibly. Yeah, I don't know the details of all of that, but
You can see some of it when
yeah,
you get close to the ballpark.
yeah.
They were adding collars, whatever carpenter or construction guy would call it. Do you hate these?
Thingamajigs.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I think another site, maybe that's what you were talking about, like in St. Louis, like, I guess north of there, but I don't know where that would be, like, that would still be French that survived. Like, what was that other site?
Well, I think anything, the grounds of the Jefferson Memorial, I think along that whole riverfront, there's probably remnants of the original French, that platted village there. But
anything left that actually had, like, building outlines, I mean, I just can't imagine any of that surviving the,
well, it's
1950s.
yeah, it's interesting. You think that, and I've worked in a lot of urban situations, looked at animal remains and projects, and there are a lot of urban situations where, like in the S-Curve project in downtown Grand Rapids, nothing could have been left. Well, they went in and they found that most situations happens, and it's kind of in the 1908 race riot site in Springfield. Instead of things being disturbed, as later buildings are being built, things are a lot of fill being dumped, and things are built on top. And so there might be destruction in some of these things if there's some real serious disturbance down there. But in most cases, there might be pavements and capped, and then everything built on top of it. So things do survive underneath. It's just capped.
It looked like on the map there was maybe like 3 or 4 blocks even further south beyond this, the Poplar Street Bridge.
Yeah, and farther north is because I don't know. I think this might be kind of towards the south end of yeah, the south end of the French area.
Yeah, in terms of your question, one of the old things, or I would guess to be this is great grandmother, who was married to a Frenchman, and she's located a lot in the south of where they are. She knows exactly where it is, south of the Poplar Street Bridge. It's right north of those large warehouses that they're trying to burn. Yeah, they just learned that they were going to make into something else. And so she's been trying to get it and get the attention of before the current mayor, the other mayor.
Yeah.
They should actually try to buy the property. It's not a big piece of property, but it's just
I think that developer says he still wants to do some project there, even though there's change.
But it's just amazing that we have so much of that picture left. And like Terry said, I mean, that's our experience. There are things that are being destroyed because they're very covered over. So,
see, some of those areas are just like big concrete loading docks, stuff.
Because they're trying to be above the river. Flooding and stuff too.
That's what goes on repeatedly, including archaeology, or fill after fill, everything breaks up, and the other time things get wiped out is when large commercial or industrial buildings go up and down buildings. Otherwise, and even there, it's in between those buildings, onto the streets or other areas, it things like.
And that's what happened with what we did in East St. Louis. I mean, that was I thought was other parts. There's something very under the river. Right along the ocean, a big part of that.
We'll have a chance sometime in the next 10 years to look at Illinois town.
Oh, good.
They're going to. They're going to. It's on the edge of that, but it's the original bird of Illinois town. But that was formative about the native mounds that are north of Edward Jonestown. I mean, do we have any idea of any preservation in that area?
Well, one of the things that I don't think there's any of the only thing that would be preserved would be borrow pits, which would have been filled in. I mean, there were large post pits. I think the mounds are pretty well gone. There were remnants of it as they were building it up. They put the footings of the bridge right where the big mound was, which upset the Osage. And the Osage actually did the archaeology there. And so that's where the Moundsea Buggy Company ended up back in the 19th century, built their building after the mound was removed. Now, one of our graduate students, former graduate students, driving along Interstate 70, right to the west of the big mound, they were doing construction, looked up and he saw an area that was exposed and went up to it and got some sherds right underneath the sidewalk. And it looked like, the photograph, it looked like a buried ape. Now, Mike Myers said, no, it was not. It was, it was all filled in. And I don't believe that.
That's what I wonder in the street areas for.
Well, there's going to be areas that are going to be
There's going to be trenches dug through them, and there's going to be a hodgepodge.
Well, yeah, there's going to be stuff that's out there. The mounds, I think, are pretty much.
Mentioned Illinois Town, is that where the junior college is?
Yes,
is
just
that,
where they're
St.
gonna
Louis?
put in the Route 3 through there, and it's gonna go to the west of that. So there's a big recycling plant right on that's like the north edge of Illinois Town, the north of the Illinois Town grid, and that it's gonna run right through there.
So is it a project?
Yeah, it also includes part of the East St. Louis Mountain Center. There's possibly Piggy's Ferry in there, and then there are a couple of sites related to the 1917 riots that are in that corridor that we're looking at. Yeah, it's the main route and then all the connecting stuff to the existing stuff. Yeah. The connect, not a full cut through.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's great. Oh,
Anything else? Yeah.
Paleo-ethnobotanical.
Well, Cricket and I have got to stand up for zooarchaeology here. Yeah, I don't know what was ethnobotanical work that was done on this.
It might be mentioned in the.
It might be in the. I don't remember who was involved with that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.